Is it my sound that is off? Why can't I hear anything? Huh?
I just heard something.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. You ready to get started?
I'm ready to roll.
Okay. Um, okay. Thank you all for joining us. I believe we are live on Facebook. Everything's good on Facebook. So what we're going to do tonight, tonight is actually going to be a more efficient meeting. We are going to first start by covering some extra items that have come up. If there's something that you guys need clarifying, or maybe you came across this, I know I've done 6 talks for different organizations this week. I have 4 more between tomorrow, and Monday. So I know that you're probably coming across different information or things that you might want clarified or talk about. So we can talk about those. And then we're going to discuss a survey, another survey. This one deals with truth and reconciliation. And I would like your feedback on the survey. Just feasibility, usability, readability, ability to take it, all that stuff. We're going to talk about decision making in education, cover our action items, and then do a breakout section. I'm actually going to keep the survey to the very end when we go to our breakout sessions. That way we can go ahead and get into the material as we're live on Facebook, and then I'll just end the live stream on Facebook at that time as we break up into breakout sessions. Sounds good, Jay?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So one of the issues, a couple of issues that we're going to talk about. The first is the concept of defunding the police. I've had this question get asked a lot. One, what does it mean? Two, what do you think about it? Defunding, defunding the police. I'm gonna go ahead and mute everybody. Defunding the police basically means, from my perspective, revisioning policing. Okay. When you hear defunding the police, that is often associated with replacing police with something else, social workers, mental health professionals, etc. That is the idea of defunding the police, the concept that police are not as necessary in all the places in society where they currently are. Now, are we for or against this? It seems like everybody is for this. Okay, Donald Trump actually came out and signed an executive order, and in that executive order, he allocated funds for co-responders. Those co-responders are people like social workers, mental health professionals, substance abuse experts, the same people that the people who are saying we want to defund the police are saying should be a part of public safety are the same people that Donald Trump called co-responders, and agreed that they should have a role in public safety. So they're
Thomas.
Yeah.
Let me jump in on that, because this has been more than just like an academic thought process for a lot of people. It's become visceral and just charged with all kinds of emotion, and some people feel insulted. We've seen police chiefs just kind of rail against the media, rail against society, feeling like police are being disrespected in all kinds of ways. And certainly that there have been some individuals amongst massive crowds that have treated police poorly. But the concept surrounding defund the police, I think when we were talking before, you said it really well. It's an unnecessarily divisive term, to get to a positive end. And that's kind of where we as a group sit, or as a team, Thomas and I, as we've discussed things, it's not about, hey, let's just blow up the whole system, but let's really revision what it should look like, how, and really evaluate. I mean, and for me, when I look at evaluation, I often look outside our borders. America has achieved great heights in many things, but so have other countries. And there are other countries, other nations, large nations, developed nations who do policing differently and get different results. And I think that's where the idea of defund the police, the concept behind it from. But the reality is, in today's world, you got to get clicks, right? You got to get attention, and revisioning the police, I don't know that that would get a lot of attention from folks. But certainly, you've seen on your social media and your interactions with folks that this has certainly grabbed the attention of a lot of people. So why do you think it's turned into such a strike point, Thomas?
Well, it's like you said. I mean, you have to galvanize people on one side of the issue or the other, right? So when you use stuff like abolish the police, right? There are a lot of people out there who would like to see the police abolished. Like, it is a horrible experience what they live in their communities. That's not every community, but there are some communities that have very bad relationships with their police. So they do want to see their police abolished, right? And so then there are people who don't have as extreme opinions about police, but they might still be anti-police. And so therefore you still have that defunding that takes away from it. But quite honestly, there is a legitimate argument for that has been made. And what I have become a believer in is that if you're talking about finite resources, okay, and public safety, say, is going to get $1 million. I know this is a small number. Public safety is going to get $1 million, okay, and only 200,000 of that is going to go to mental health. Well, if mental health is a bigger issue, then that means you're probably going to need more than that 200,000. You're going to need more funding, and that money is going to have to come from somewhere. And so in cities, we're talking about places that are strapped for cash. They don't have a lot of room in their budgets already, and such a significant portion is going toward police. So there is argument for reallocation of those funds from that account to other accounts, right? That is the term, that is the operative term that when I'm in conversation with leadership and we're actually talking about the policy side of this, we use the term reallocation, not defunding, because defunding again sends the message that is anti-police, as opposed to reallocation where you're revisioning this whole system. And again, reallocation just isn't as sexy a word.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is I think people on all sides of the spectrum, when it comes to experience with police, would acknowledge the fact that we ask our law enforcement officers to do far too much. They are responsible for, stray dogs running the street sometimes. They're responsible for marital problems. They are responsible for physical injuries. They are responsible for bar fights. They are responsible for child abuse. They are responsible for all kinds of things that we ask them to show up and be able to disseminate all the homelessness, right? All the different issues of society. If it needs an immediate response, if it's not burning or bleeding, any other immediate response just gets dumped on the police. And that is an unfair expectation to have of them. And that's really, a lot of people, if you would just take a step back and say, well, what if we could relieve them of so many duties? Would they be better at the one thing that they are truly directed to do, and that is prevent and solve crime?
And
Because
I've had this talk with police chiefs and like literally the entire rank and file. And I don't think that there's a police officer out there who doesn't agree that they do too much or who doesn't disagree the
you said it
negative.
right.
All right. Right. I think they will agree that they do too much, right? They get calls for things that they shouldn't be getting calls for, right? And so that's the whole revisioning is you can take that away and then, you know, have somebody else do those jobs who are better equipped to do them or actually trained and educated to do them.
Yeah. Well, and even for many of you who were on our very first call, we had an individual by the name of Ankome who isn't a police officer, but he did serve in the military, and he made an analogy to how he served in the military. That when they went out into a particular area to police it, to ensure its safety, they went with an interpreter. They went with a communications expert. They went with someone who was there to physically protect them. They went with someone who was there to engage the community in positive activity. So as a team, they rolled out, and only one person had to be at that heightened sense of physical defense. Because if you've ever been in an environment, whether it be because of personal protection, protection of your family, protection of others, walking around all the time with this heightened sense of I need to physically protect, and that there could be aggressive altercation where that's your primary mode of thinking, that just creates a different dynamic than, all right, the only thing I have to think about, I know somebody's here physically protecting me, and I can walk around and I can ensure that we're serving the needs of this community and we're understanding what is necessary here. That makes for a stronger force altogether. And whether they're enveloped within the police force or they're totally separate, those are conversations that, hey, let's not get bogged down in the nitty gritty of it, but let's understand that there's opportunity to make police jobs easier in the sense of allowing them to focus on one thing instead of 15, while making their outcomes better because of a team environment and a cooperative environment working with others in that regard.
Yeah, so that really is what I want to talk or wanted to clarify for defunding the police. I really see that as a win-win situation, that if we get out of thinking of it as being us versus them, then that there are conversations where they I'm pretty sure they say, yeah, we don't want to do this. Have somebody else do it, right? The other part is a lot of the funding is used for overtime, right? Think about being a police officer, 10-hour shifts. I get burned out of working after 6 or 8 hours. I have to take a break. I need to come back maybe a few hours later, right? They're going at this for 10 hours, call to call, emergency to emergency, pull over after pull over, in an elevated sense of anxiety. All right, that is exhausting and it is tiring. And just start to think about what happens when you've been working too long. You get exhausted, you get frustrated, and you get tired. These are human beings that we're talking about. They're not superheroes. They're human beings. Okay, so what happens when you get exhausted? Your patience becomes less, right? You become more authoritative. You want things done now. And when you're talking about a citizen on the other side that might just be the same way, then that's when you have a lot of conflict. So I'm a firm believer in the solution being making the police job easier, right? 8 hours, do your 8 hours and go home. Work 40 hours a week and then get mental rest, right? Take forced time off where you are absolutely paid. You don't have to worry about anything, but you can take your family on a vacation and unwind, right? And because we have revisioned policing and we have these other industries and other professionals involved, we can probably afford to give you that time away, right? So these are just some of the things that when we're talking about the funding of policing and why we talk about defunding it, it's not necessarily a defunding issue, it's a reallocation issue. And that defunding becomes a conversation ender. And, you know, like I said, I've been talking on a policy level with leaders in this entire area, and I'm trying to encourage them to not use the word defunding because it is unnecessarily divisive. Re-envision it, reimagine it, reallocate it.
So if I could just maybe wrap that piece up, for those of us on this call, uh, we're allies, right? We're looking to, at the end of the day, make the experience of being Black in America more equal to that which we see all around us. And this defunding, reallocating the police would help do that. So when you see or hear individuals speaking about defund the police and just they immediately dismiss it because, well, that's a stupid idea. We're just going to have anarchy. And, you know, what are you going to do when somebody's, you know, child is, you know, getting beat up in the backyard or, you know, beat up in the back alley, or you're going to call, oh, sorry, no one's here. And you see these memes going around, you know, I encourage you to, if going back to what I said from the very beginning, when you have a relationship with that person, engage with them and say, hey, listen, I understand defunding the police sounds idiotic, or whatever term you want to use it to relate to them sounds completely irrational. But let me tell you what the actual policy is behind it. And I think you might feel better about it, because at the end of the day, everybody wants police officers to go home safely. That everybody wants Black individuals to go home safely. We want these interactions to be positive, but we don't set up the system to do it right now. And all we have to do is just take a look in the mirror and be honest with ourselves. Is this working the way we want it to? No, let's make changes. Does that mean there's horrible human beings in there? No, it just means that there's human beings in there. And after 9 hours, I don't want to be pulled over by anybody after 9 hours of hard work and everything that they went through. I want somebody who's enjoying their life and enjoying their job. So I think we wrapped that up pretty well.
Yeah. And we got another question about citizen review boards versus boards of public safety. And they wanted clarification on the difference. And my experience, I don't have experience with boards of public safety. I actually looked it up, and there's one in South Bend, Indiana, and Colin actually asked a question, who's from Indiana, so I'm assuming that's the model that you're looking at. That actually looks like a very proactive citizen-based model for public safety, where they actually they do the swearing in, they determine the amount of training, they determine a lot of the policies that go to policing. Is a citizen-based panel that determines those policies, as opposed to a citizen review panel where the police department establishes those policies, the hiring, do the swearing in and all that stuff. And the citizen review board basically just hear complaints. And if they're entitled or empowered with subpoena power, they might be able to pull records. But one of them is a proactive citizen participatory board, where the other one is a reactive after the fact assessment type board. That's my understanding. But again, I have no personal experience with the boards of public safety, but we have a few citizen review boards in the area.
You know, one last thing, because we brought up cities that are doing it differently. I know you and I talked several weeks ago now, when all of this started coming up. What cities are doing it well? What cities are have made the adjustments? And you brought up some changes in Azusa that were actually very, very positive. Could you speak to those a little bit, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I don't want to spend too much time talking on that, because I think there's probably some changes. Well, I know that there are changes that need to be made there as well. And that actually goes to the reallocation discussion. Azusa have done a lot more training. They do a lot more training than a lot of other police departments, even in the area. And so one of the big things, the big accomplishments of the Azusa Police Department is a few years ago, there were rampant Mexican gangs in Azusa, and they basically got together a task force and took to the streets and ended up taking the gangs off the streets. That those gangs were basically hunting uh, innocent African black men who just walking around, handling their own business. They just end up killed and targeted by these gangs. So they ended up taking that down. And actually, there was a story shared here recently about an Azusa officer who saved someone's life who was suicidal, right? And again, showed poise. The guy was in a position of wanting to have suicide by cop, but this officer talked him down and saved his life. That's a training situation. And so Azusa, I know they pride themselves on this type of training. They do a lot more de-escalation training, implicit bias training than is required by post. But again, resources, right?
Right.
A mental health team. They have, I believe they participate in the MET program, which is a mental health team where a mental health professional accompanies police to various calls. Well, they only have one of those, right? And that one person gets shared among a few cities. Okay, so when we're talking about resources that are being provided, we're talking about being able to have more clinicians on these type of calls and being able to supplement law enforcement. Okay, and Donald Trump's position, and quite honestly, that I'm in support of it, is these co-responders. If we don't have the funds to, or we don't have the ability to take from police and give to the co-responders, then the federal government needs to come in with more funding for us to provide more co-responders in addition to what it is that we have. But it's all about revisioning.
Yeah, and like anything else, in our government, I'm sure there's some waste that's happening, and if we're going to be doing this revisioning and trying to find dollars, there's places where money is leaked out in pretty much any organization, right? So find those opportunities, and as we've been saying, it's more about reallocate than defund, abolish. Let's just equip them well to do one or two things really, really well, and don't worry about everything else. So let's hit our next topic.
And I just want to respond back to the panels and
Oh,
boards.
yeah.
Generally, they are either elected or appointed. Most of the time, they're appointed, and that's kind of the problem. Is you got friends of the folks in power appointing these folks, or they're being elected, and we already know about disenfranchisement. So, getting community representation on these boards have been a real problem as far as diversity. And most of the time, the boards are not equipped with subpoena power or full review power. So really it becomes ceremonial, I would say, or performative. Yeah, Brianna, I think that's true. I think you do end up getting, some bias reinforced in those boards. Okay, so it's 6 o'clock. I wanted to be done with this, so let's go ahead and jump in. Bounded rationality is a concept by, I'm not going to talk about the author. What do you think about that, Jason?
What? We're not going academic resourcing?
I'm not going academic. I'm not going to even use the term anymore. Okay, so it was originally thought that humans, when we made decisions, made the best decisions possible. Okay, research ended up finding out that that is absolutely not the case. What we do when we make decisions based on the very first information that is available in our minds. Okay, and the quality of that information and how much of that information you have accessible is a big influence on the type of decisions you ultimately end up making, right? Why would a person go to jail for stealing a loaf of bread when there's a food pantry right down the street that provides that bread for free? Well, did that person know about the free bread down the street? If they didn't, then that's a problem. Or if they think that this bread is better for whatever reason, then that's bad quality of information. We're talking about the amount of information a person has when they're making decisions, okay? And I put this here because this is the way the media portrayed these two individuals, all right? And I'm sure everybody knows who these two individuals are, but one of them is accused of committing a horrible rape on a helpless, intoxicated person at on a college campus. The other one, and not even accused, he was actually convicted, found guilty of it. The other one is a 17-year-old boy who was minding his own business, coming from the store with Skittles and Arizona iced tea, and ended up being shot and killed by a random adult. Okay. Um, the media portrayed these two. These are the images from the media. All right. And if you look at this, you would think that the person on the left, who is Trayvon Martin, would have been the person who's the rapist because of the coloring, the picture that they use, all of that stuff, compared to this person who's a convicted rapist who literally in all the pictures that we found was considered a, what was it, a high achieving swimmer, right? All-American swimmer is what all the media called him. An All-American swimmer has been accused of rape. An All-American swimmer has been accused of or has been convicted of rape, right? The media uses terms that plays off of our education or lack thereof. We call them dog whistles, okay? And dog whistles are basically terms that are used where people get a particular understanding from the use of those terms that everybody doesn't get, right? So when you hear like criminal and you hear actually this was a big thing in the, I believe, Bush Dukakis situation, the Tyrone, right? This evil person, the super predator, these criminals, all these terms are used to signal to people who they're talking about. And then they reinforce those terms with images like this that make us think a particular way about individuals. Yeah, I agree. The media should be 100% defunded. And so when we start talking about stuff like this, we start to think, well, this is why we have some of the race issues that we have. One of the biggest responses that I'm getting from people now is, I had no idea this was happening. I had no idea this was happening the way that it was. And that has a lot to do with our education. Okay. And so when we talk about what could this group accomplish, if all was said and done and we went back to our regular jobs and we disbanded this group, what is one thing that we could get accomplished in this group? We come upon it yesterday, and that is ethnic study courses in all of education, every level, right? And there's a reason why ethnic studies matters so much. Education itself deals with understanding history, right? It's an opportunity for us to exchange cultures. It's really where you start to learn about yourself, your identity, and who's who. One of the things that I learned in my education system was cops are heroes, right? Like I still believe that cops are heroes, right? It has been ingrained in my psyche that if you put on that uniform, you are a hero, right? But I also know there are some horrible human beings putting on that uniform right now. Okay, but that causes a what we call cognitive dissonance, or I disagree internally with myself. What do you think about that, Jason? All right. Well, I disagree internally with myself, so it causes a conflict in what it is I think or know about the world, right? So one of my issues growing up was I learned to revere cops. I learned cops were heroes, but then I got jammed up by a cop coming home from school one day that literally had me get up against the wall, searched me, did all that stuff. I had no idea what it was for. And his whole thing was, if you didn't do anything yet, you're going to. And that's literally what he told me. I'm a 3.5 honor roll student playing sports in ASB, student government, all this stuff. And I'm having a cop tell me if I haven't done anything wrong yet, I'm going to. That caused me to have a internal friction with myself. If these are heroes, and I am naturally a problem to the heroes, who am I? What am I thinking about myself? Right. And it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating. So when we talk about education, we start to understand ourselves, our role in the greater society, and who's who. We grow social competence. We're able to interact with people, interpersonal communication and relationships, and we're able to develop emotional intelligence. But education systems that don't cater to these things and don't make sure that we understand the narratives of or the history of this country and how those histories have interfaced with the various narratives do a disservice in our ability to see where each other is coming from and understanding how we might be able to move forward. So the biggest issue that I see is division. We're all separated. But if we saw this as a holistic thing, we all want to be happy. We all want to live in healthy relationships and communities. Then we have to have a cultural understanding and appreciation for each other. So our goal in this isn't just police reform, it's also educational reform, where we're literally going to take a systematic approach and trying to get ethnic studies courses at all levels of education, to get exposure and education on what I think helps bring cultures and cultural understanding closer together.
So Thomas, you know, that was a lot. And I know we covered a lot there, which is great. You know, we hit on a few really key things, encouraging and driving towards the implementation at all levels of social awareness training. And this would really this would even begin to approach the, revisioning police officers, because if people came up with more cultural understanding of one another and more acceptance of one another, that would change the way people perceive one another when they are in even confrontational situations. I know we're going to go a little bit deeper on the inclusion of those educational materials, but something you said kind of sparked up some chats there around the media. And one of the things that for me I really grasp onto is the reality that the media shows you what you want to see. Like, that's their job. It's to make money, and they show you what you want to see. And that one of the problems with our media is that it's become so siloed that you just appeal to the base on this side and the base on that side. And whichever channel you tune into, you're not hearing anything of the other one. And there you go, CNN or Fox, pick your poison, right? Like, at the end of the day, we need to find ways to hear more of the truth of a story. And sometimes I'll listen to Fox on a story, and then listen to CNN on the full story, and then dive in and do some more information so that I have a rounded picture, because everybody's putting their spin on it. And one of the things that's been so powerful, the reason why, think about the majority of the recent outrages of the loss of Black lives, right? Many of them have been sparked off because there was social media, our own physical evidence that's coming out with no filters, and people are seeing this before anybody has a chance to put a spin on it. And it's that ability to have just the raw idea and filter it in that's been able to touch people's hearts and say, oh my gosh, I have, like you were saying, I never knew this existed. I didn't know this was, yeah, I heard one or two complaining about it, but I just figured, they're blowing it out of proportion. So we have to understand the power that we have in our social media, and the power that all media plays an influence over us. There's upsides and downsides to it. So, I don't like blaming things so much on the media, because the media only gives us what we ask for. At the end of the day, they spin it and cycle it up so that we want more of it, but that's their job. And if we filter the information that way, knowing that, hey, there's always spin on this, I can't take what they're saying as truth, because they're trying to sensationalize it. And the reality is, we just talked about that with defund the police. The reason why it's not reallocate the budget is that's not grasping enough. Nobody's following that headline. We've talked about reallocating budgets for decades, but nobody cares. When you say defund the police, all of a sudden you got radicals on one side of the issue that are like, yeah, defund the police, get them out of here. Even though it's by and large the same thing that has been talked about for decades. But now it's got traction because it has a cool name that you can hashtag. So it's a really interesting place that we're in our culture, where you've got to get more and more extreme just to get attention. So I just wanted to jump in on that piece, because I know a lot of people are pretty visceral about media as well. And how do we handle that? And how do we allow this to either enlighten or distract us from the realities of the world around us?
Right. So, yeah, and I think that being strategic in getting these courses in school is going to be instrumental on a bunch of different levels, especially when we talk about representation. Right. The goal and hope is that the people teaching these ethnic studies courses will be people from those representative from those groups. That way, people are actually seeing role models that look like them as teachers, reinforcing positive stereotypes. We also learn that minority students in schools that are ran and taught by minority individuals have less racial disparities when it comes to special education distribution and classification, as well as use of discipline. Right. So we start to think more about why people are the way they are, or the students in front of us, when we have a diversity of individuals who are in front of these students and providing this education. So this is something that I think is just very important. And after watching the documentary last night, we came to the conclusion, really it was Liz and Andrea, that they're both educators. Liz Canales and Andrea Minkoff, they were very big on the social justice aspect of education being the key that is missing, right? 1992 happened. There's a pre-1992 LAPD and a post-1992 LAPD. Well, if LAPD post-92 is very different from LAPD pre-1992, why is LA still burning, right? And that has a lot to do with the fact that the systemic structures that is the cause of the burning did not change, even though there were significant police reforms and probably some that are still necessary. So revisioning schools and how they're educating our students to be social justice warriors, and even being prepared to have these conversations is a big deal. Jason, anything you wanted to add to that?
Maybe just one quick story to illustrate how impactful having representation in education is. Because as you were talking, I was just thinking, I don't know of a single educator that I had that was a person of color, so all the way through up until college. I don't think that I had a single person of color. I know I had, well, no, I had a couple of Hispanic female teachers, but that's it. It was, but the thing that I wanted to talk about is a story that my friend Grace Wabuki shared. She's doing her own thing in this revisioning of society and helping address racism. And she shared a story of how in her AP history course in 11th grade, she went through American history, European history, went through colonial history, and all these different segments of time. And at the end of the school year, it came to the African history, and the professor said, you know what, that's not going to be on the test. Or the teacher said, that's not going to be on your AP English test. So let's just skip it and move on. And the entire year, and Grace happens to be of African descent, like she, not African-American where, came here from slavery, but came from Africa to America years later. This entire semester, she had been looking forward to reading about her own history, and it was skipped over as irrelevant. And what that told, the message that she shared is, this isn't important enough for anybody to learn. I'm not important enough for anybody to learn about. And these are powerful messages that we send our young people. And, you may think like, oh, well, it's just time or whatever, but these are young, impressionable minds. And we spend weeks and weeks and months and semesters talking about the great American founders, and we skip over the day and a half that was going to be spent on the entire African continent and all of its history. these are things that we need to address, call out, and demand change around. And not just for the sake of people who are, immigrating here from Africa, because we all listen to, we all interact with each other, and we all need to have this type of an education. So school reform is definitely something on our agenda, and we're going to equip you guys today with some tools to help make a real change.
Yeah, so this is what we're calling on folks to do with the time that you have, if you have the time and space to do it. Research the school board, contact information and meeting time. When does your school board meet? Okay. Ask questions and gather the information. What type of ethnic studies are currently provided? And if they are provided, who provides them, how often, right? Understand which grades that they get them, which grades they don't, etc. And then we're going to be emailing a template to go to school board members that basically is asking for them to consider this and to put it on for discussion, how we go about including ethnic studies in all education. I think it's appropriate for K through 12, but I also want, I'm teaching critical race theory at the University of Laverne Law School. I don't think I'm actually really sure we don't necessarily have Black studies at Laverne, or even though I believe they have them at Pomona. So we need more consistency in exposure to this stuff across the board. So engaging K through 12 and universities for exposure or opportunities for taking those courses. These are some things that you might want to consider. These are also going to go out with the information, right? The demographics of the city, the range of ratings the schools received, right? Is one school in the city a 2, while the other school in the city a 9, right? What is the reason for those disparities? The graduation rates based on schools, is there a disparity? School discipline rates based on race, demographics and qualification of special education programs, the diversities of teachers, and the quality of food that is provided to students. These are all equity questions that we need to be asking about our educational system and the type of outcomes it is creating itself. The school to prison pipeline is a huge issue in the Black community, and it has a lot to do with structural racism. So we're not just going to public comments and doing the low hanging fruit. We're trying to get to the actual structure that creates the outcomes that we're trying to address. And so the action items, we again have the template that literally you just have to put your name or something on and then send out. I want you to try having a conversation this week with somebody you do not disagree or you do not agree with, right? And the goal of this conversation is not to persuade them. Don't try and persuade. Just ask questions. Just seek understanding. And as much as it pains you to walk through their logic, do it. Try and get a feel for how somebody you disagree with is thinking, digesting, assessing, and seeing a situation. And then with your not attempting to persuade them, take a note of what their reaction to that is, okay? We are putting up the Facebook event groups for all the city council in the area so that we're making a collaborative, collective effort at engaging our leadership. So please join the event pages for your particular city council and whether you live or work. If you're on a action team, then coordinate with your team members to add further information and further these endeavors. Jonas, want to give him a shout out for the amount of work and information that he's put in onto that Black book. So stuff like that, just keep that going. Like seriously, you guys have no idea. In fact, the spreadsheet with all the links to all of the different city council meetings, I actually provided another organization, 2 other organizations. So hundreds of people are now accessing the forms that is being created by this group, and that's awesome. And then let's watch Freedom Summer, right? We're next week we're going to be getting together for another film and chat. Let's do Freedom Summer and let's talk about it. It's on your top 10 preferred list. And I think it's really good. But quite honestly, I couldn't stop crying watching this film. Like this film, like when I think about allyship as a black man, I'm not gonna lie. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys right now. It scares me, right? I know it's hard work. I know it's absolutely hard work, and for people who aren't living it, it really scares me that this is going to get exhausting. It's going to get tiring. It's going to get discouraging, and then it's going to get easy for you to go back to what it is you're doing. And so that is a constant fear that I have. And so, like again, I'm very encouraged to have all of you show back up, but it is a constant fear. And so I watched Freedom Summer, and I'm looking at these allies putting their bodies on the line, putting their interests on the line. And like I said, I couldn't stop crying. Like it was just such an amazing thing to see human beings go beyond their own normal circumstance to say there's a bigger call for justice here, and I must answer that call. And to know that I am in a network with several human beings that are answering that same call to justice is, I mean, it's just one of the most powerful things. And that's why I've been sharing with quite a few people. You've probably heard me say this. I don't care how late you are to this discussion. My ancestors right now are happy that we are having this discussion. My ancestors right now are happy that you are answering this call to justice. There's an eternal peace that is being realized because you've taken this step as an ally. Okay,
Yes.
so Freedom Summer, when I watch that, that to me is like, this is the beauty and the power of humanity. And it's not in the South. It's not anywhere else. It's literally right here. It's right here in this Zoom. It's right here with people who are in my network. So, I mean, I know I hate getting all mushy and stuff. Like I get teary eyed, and I'm a big softie, right? But that movie that did so much to me as far as the value in what it is that you guys are doing. So I want to watch that movie, and then I want to talk about it with you all. So that these are the action items for the week. We are going to post them. If you're in our email chain, you will receive the email. And yeah, that's
Also,
what we have.
hey, Thomas, can I just tag in with you on that? The reality of the appreciation that I have is just as strong. So it encourages me. I mean, all day today, I was like, man, I hope somebody shows up. I hope somebody shows up. I hope somebody shows up. And you know, I sometimes you'll see. I don't know if you guys can tell on my camera, but I'm like just swiping through. I'm swiping through, seeing different people come back because it strengthens my heart to know that we're not in this fight alone, and that that in fact the network is growing. I mean, I'm kind of a numbers guy. It's what I do, but you know, I look at our group is growing. We're almost over 400 people who have decided to at least learn about being an ally, and that just, oh, what that does for my heart. I can't explain it to you, you know, because it's not about me. It's about my nieces and my nephews. It's about my kids. It's about a generation that maybe, just maybe, this group of 400 people who are actually willing to just give a insert word about what's going on, maybe they'll make it different for the ones that come behind us. And what I really want to implore you guys and gals with it is begin to reach out and draw people into this network. Begin to say, hey, listen, I'm learning. I want you to come learn with me. Think of just one person, two people. You can say, listen, just next Thursday, I don't care what you look like on your Zoom, just jump on. You can hide your screen. You can put up a cute picture of yourself when you got all dolled up. It doesn't matter. Just come and hear the hearts of a few people who are walking through and trying to make real change. And let's grow our allyship so that, because what we really need is we need critical mass. We need the legislators and the city council and the school board to realize that there is more than one side of this issue, and there is more than one side of this issue that's willing to speak up and keep speaking up, because it's not a I've said this many times. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. This is a human issue. It's not a Christian issue. It's not an atheist issue. It's a life issue. And if we're not all willing to get on the same side of this, what are we missing? So it shouldn't matter. I thought the story last week was beautiful of a young lady who didn't think her father would be on board with this type of stuff because he was of a particular political persuasion. But he called her, or he was heartbroken over it already, and now they're walking through it together. So don't even filter. Don't like, oh well, I can't reach out to that person. I've seen their social media posts. They're crazy about all this stuff. Maybe that's exactly what they need. Somebody who can speak to them, and they know that somebody who they consider safe is exploring this, and now it's safe for them to explore. So begin to grow the network. Let's impact more people.
And quite honestly, we're at the point now where we're operating in love. So if you hear something that Jason and I say that you want to challenge or whatever, don't forget, I'm a lawyer by trade. Okay. I like debating. Okay. So let's get to the ugly truth. If we're on two different sides of the coin, maybe we end on two different sides of the coin, but I really want to understand where I might be wrong or where there might be disagreement. I get so much value in walking away from a conversation feeling utterly wrong. Absolutely wrong. I have no problem being
I'm so glad to add value to your life.
You get out of here, man. You get out. Right. So I'm a debater. I'm gonna go back and forth with you, but at the end of the day, it's a more profound truth that we all seek and getting that greater understanding. So speak Absolutely. Up now. We're Jason and I don't have all the answers. We're here now as a team. So don't be afraid to take us to task on something that we say.
Yeah, I have actually one of my former youth ministry students is on the call with us today. And I used to tell my youth group all the time, if I teach you something that doesn't line up with what you believe about the Bible, you better call me out on it. If I'm not equipping you enough to step up and challenge me, then what's the point? And it's the same thing here. Thomas and I don't know everything. And sometimes we say things in a way that maybe don't come off right. And we need to be, we need help understanding that so that we can continue to advance this message and not have something broken down because it gets lost in translation. And we literally like work with each other and coach each other on this stuff too. So we're so glad to have all of you a part of this, and please engage where you have questions or even where you may disagree. And disagreement's okay. We don't have to be 100% aligned on everything that's going to happen for this movement to move forward. We just need to agree that the end result is worth it.
Right. All right. So we're at 6:30. I put the link. I'm going to drop it again. If you could complete the survey and then provide feedback on the survey, that'd be great. That's to help get an understanding of what folks are thinking as far as potential police policies and potential policy changes, as well as how that might relate to your participation or desired participation in Truth and Reconciliation program. So if you guys could fill out that survey, that would be awesome. How are you guys doing? You guys want to do breakout rooms? If you guys are tired, we can also, okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up into breakout rooms. And this is basically our time for healing, our time for talking, and just to connect, right? The issues that you've been facing or things that you might just want to get off your chest. This is the time. I'm killing the Facebook live